Well, would we like to get started?
Do it. Hello, hello,
Sure.
everyone. How you
Hello.
there? This is our ex Fabula, and this is our last story tour for a while. But it's been super fun to be able to participate
Hmm.
in this particular project, and we have an extra special guest to finish us off. And so, my name is Michaela, and then I'll have Nicole kind of talk about what story tour is for those who are watching for the first time, and then we can dive into our guest. So, Nicole, can you tell us what story tour is and why it's important?
Yes, I'm just pulling up our description right now. I had to
Mhm.
close out everything a moment ago. So, 1 second. So we've been doing story tour all summer long, and hopefully, in some other capacity, we'll be able to continue this series, like maybe in the new year, or if anything, again next summer. And so, Story Tour is a virtual affinity space series focused on stories from Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and people of color, created and led by ex Fabulous Black and Brown staff. They're free and they're on YouTube and they're live every time. How's that?
That's great. I love it. And so we have been able to engage in powerful conversations with uh, Milwaukee's deaf community, as well as queer folks in our community, as well as media specialists in our community. And so to be able to continue having these conversations is just super transformative and super important. And I believe that Daniel is a wonderful guest to be able to finish everything off. And so before we say hi to Daniel, I really just want to explain to everybody why I'm so excited to have him here. And I'm going to read his bio so that you all are fully aware of the awesomeness that is Daniel Guzman King. So, Daniel Guzman King is serving his second term as a councilman of the Oneida Nation. The councilman serves as a member of the Legislative Operating Committee, responsible for developing and amending new laws, codes, and policy for the Oneida Nation. Daniel will be promoting the nation's interests on a tribal, local, and state and national level as he has liaison responsibilities to the Oneida Nation's Airport Hotel Corporation, Community Development Planning Committee, Finance Committee, Quality of Life Committee, Environmental Resource Board, Tribal Conservation Advisory Council, Southeastern Wisconsin Tribal Services, and Health Division. Whew! In 2019, the councilman was also selected to serve on the Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board, which is a regional board advocating for healthcare system improvements on behalf of tribal communities in the Midwest. Daniel Guzman King is an activist for positive change for the Oneida community. Daniel stood on the front lines at the Standing Rock Indian Reservation to fight for tribal land and water rights that would impact all of Indian country and under, understands the importance of exercising Oneida's nation sovereignty. Daniel will continue building a sustainable nation by supporting reacquisition of the Oneida land base, protecting water resources, enhancing the local food system, supporting a sustainable healthcare system, promoting economic diversification, supporting an optimal education system, strengthening the intergenerational relationships amongst the Oneida community, promoting the Oneida language and culture. Councilman Daniel Guzman King is of the Turtle Clan. His loving family includes his grandparents, the late Peter Buzzy and Martha Scannendor King, his mother Joyce King, his brother Lorenzo Guzman, aunties Louise, Cornelius, Margaret King, Susan Ryder, and Kathy King, and Uncle Peter King Jr. So without further ado, we will say hello to Daniel, who is amazing in all his things. Jack of all trades.
Segundo sa mag-wake, Lola Nios Niyo Gets, Waganyata ni Wigitalod, Oniotiaga ni Wiguhunjod. Hello, everyone. Hola a todos. I want to first introduce myself in my Oneida language. And my Oneida name is Lola Niost. He makes good music. And I am of the Turtle Clan. And I am of the people of the Standing Stone, otherwise known as Oneida. So just wanted to say that and utilize my language here when introducing myself. So thank you for having me here. And as was stated in my bio, I'm now in my second term as councilman and representative of the Oneida Nation. Thank you for having me a part of your conversations here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This is great. It's an honor. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I would love to hear more about it. Before we do that, I want to just check in with you real quick. Very simple check in. Can you give us a rose and a thorn? So, a rose would be a highlight or something beautiful that happened to you this week, and a thorn, something that wasn't so great this week. And you don't have to have either, but and they're interchangeable, so one can go first, another can go first. It really is up to you. But just check in, tell us something that was
I,
beautiful.
it was like at the beginning of the week, of the weekend into Monday, I had a rose, a thorn, then another rose. So I had a great weekend visiting family, spending time with some family, and was able to do some golfing, which I enjoy. And but hanging out with my family, I got limited sleep, and so I went into Monday with about 3-4 hours of sleep, and trying to be attentive in meetings was very difficult. And in my position, you need rest. It's really mandatory, and so. But by Monday night, I was had a previously scheduled massage, and I passed out on the table, and I caught up on my rest over the next 2 nights. So yeah, that's my rose and thorns.
I love that so much. That was great. So let's dive into all of your titles because you have many. And I just really want to know about the work that you do. So we gave the bio, we gave the description, but I really want to know how these positions attach to your values, and I want to know how you got started doing the work that you do.
So first of all, it's something that a mentor had to teach me and remind me of is who I am first and foremost. Uh, and first, I'm a son, and then I'm a brother, and then I'm an uncle, and then I'm a community member. I'm a Oneida Nation tribal member, and then a councilman. Um, and that councilman title comes last before after those other titles, and those other titles come with responsibilities in each one, and so I have to adhere to those and carry out and fulfill those responsibilities first, and and that's all kind of included in who I am as a person, as a man, and then also since last year I'm a board member of the Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board. So those are my titles. I'm not sure if I missed any, but um, for as far as the councilman and uh, the board member titles, it, the only I have to give credit to my friends and my family, and they're the reason why I have those titles. I previously ran for council for my tribe 2 times, and I failed. And it was only when I asked for help from my relatives that they stepped up to the plate and assisted me, and they gave up of themselves, their time, their energy to help me get elected. And it was their support and their belief in me that helped me to get elected the first time and the second time. And so it was a kind of a longer journey. I think the first time I ran for office was in 2011, I believe, and then our elected terms are 3 years, and so I ran 2 previous times over. By the third time, I guess the third time was a charm. So, but so yeah, it's not an easy process to get elected and get reelected in any capacity, in any type of government. It's you have to put in the work. It's hard work, and it takes a team, and it takes your friends and family behind you to support you. And then for the board member title, I was in the capacity of councilman. I attend a lot of consultations with either the states or with the federal government and their departments. And so I've attended a number of those over the last few years, and throughout that process, a number of my colleagues from other tribes um, thought I would be a good fit for the Great Lakes Area Tribal Health Board, and they asked me to sit on that board. And so that was the end of last year in 2019. And so I've been serving on that board since I think it was November or so.
Thank you so much.
Hi, okay, Daniel. So let's get to some stories here. So I met Daniel through my friend Lana and Desiree. And so what was that? I was DJing that night. I was DJing freestyle music. And so I was acting a fool that night, and Daniel was there. It was funny. So I didn't meet Daniel like in any of the important work that he does. He was just there hanging out with mutual friends. And so when I was reaching out to Lana and Desiree about, who is somebody that I could, reach out to or that they would recommend for this show, they, gave me Daniel's information. And so then we had a conversation over the phone a few weeks ago. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about him. One thing I noticed right away was his last name. And so he's got the last name Guzman. And I've known a couple other Native men who also have a mixed last name. And so, in our conversation, I was just asking him, well, tell me a little bit more about like how that, like, why do you have this last name? And so he began to share his story about his mother and his father. And I remember back in college, because I graduated with Lana at Alverno, and me and Lana, Lana's a Native woman. Is Lana with Oneida? I don't know. I'm not sure.
She is part Oneida, yes.
Okay. So me and Lana would have conversations in class regarding, because Lana like asked me, well, how do you identify? Do you identify as Indigenous or Mexican or Latinx? How do you identify? And so this was prior to me doing I ended up doing one of those ancestry DNA tests and whatnot. And it came back like a super high percentage of just like Indigenous blood from Mexico. And so that really got me starting to think about like my own identity and like, what do I identify as, and what do I want? Like, do I want to claim Mexican identity? What do I want to claim? And so like that began my journey of my own personal identity and my own story. And so I had a conversation with Daniel about like what he thought about all of that, because it's very complex. And so I would just like Daniel to kind of maybe share a little bit of his perspective, and then also his story and his background with his mother and father, because it also ties into government as well, right? So I'm gonna let you kind of take it from here a little bit.
Okay. So my mother, Joyce King, was she's considered full blood. That's a whole nother topic, but she's considered a full blood Oneida. And so there's the blood quantum issue with the federal government, where they, I guess, try to quantify us by the level or amount of percentage of blood, indigenous blood that we have, and it's actually in a kind of a process of elimination. You start off at full blood, and when you have a mixed child, then they go down to 50% and a quarter, and then so on, and then all of a sudden there is no tribal members left. So that is a very intentional policy from the United States federal government to eliminate tribes, and it's something we're fighting against. So, yeah, my mother is Oneida, and she's of the Turtle Clan, and so we are a matrilineal society, which means we follow our mother's lineage. And so, as an Oneida man, I'm born into the Turtle Clan, and so that Turtle Clan goes all the way back through the mother's line. And I've done a little bit of research. I want to do some more extensive research to where our people have come from, which is upstate New York. We have our traditional homelands are in Oneida, New York, and so that clan system, it sets the families and it kind of it helps to create structure within the community, and the traditional community, I should say, and within the government from a traditional perspective. And so there's a lot of uses and purposes of the clan system that were utilized more effectively many years ago, and which can be utilized even today if we choose to, but it's not effectively used, even though many people know their clan and maybe participate in ceremonies with their clan. And then there's many Oneidas and other tribal members from other tribes that don't know their clan. There's a lot of people who don't know their family lineage. So that's a very important piece in recovering and reclaiming our identity, in, even for myself to understand, my lineage. So that's on my mother's side. And on my father's side, his name is Lorenzo Guzman, and he's from Mexico. And he lives in Ciudad Juarez on the border of El Paso, Texas. And he's kind of been living and working on the border, going back and forth for many years. But when he was a young man, he came up to Madison, Wisconsin to work in one of the factories. And at that same time in the 70s, the federal government had job relocation programs for tribal communities, and they would send out their federal contractor employees to go door to door to tribal communities and offer jobs in cities. And so there was a big relocation era, and I'm not sure if it started in, I think, around the 50s, 60s into the 70s, 80s. And it was they were trying to get tribal members off of the reservations into the cities to assimilate, and they would offer jobs and housing. And so it was a really an attractive thing for tribal members at that time, because there was extreme poverty on most tribal communities on their reservations. There's no jobs available. And so if you have the federal government coming to your door saying, we have a job for you and we have housing for you all set up, ready to go, the choice is easy for a lot of folks to move off the reservation into the city. So that's what happened with my mother in the late 70s. And she moved from Oneida, Wisconsin down to Sun Prairie, Madison area, and started working in the factories there. And that's where she met my father at that time, who came from Mexico to work. So it's kind of an interesting thing. At that time, we have two people of color migrating for work. At that time, so that's kind of a something to I think about, and everything that was going on in that era. So and the lack of opportunity for folks, and and we can kind of look at it today, and what opportunities are there for folks now, for people of color, and how that has changed, how it hasn't changed. Um, so that's another conversation there. But yeah, so they met in the Madison area, and they had my older brother. His name is Lorenzo. Also, he's Lorenzo Jr., and he was born in Madison. And then less than 2 years later, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we lived there for a few years. And then my mother and my father separated, and we ended up coming back to the reservation in Oneida. So yeah.
Yeah, so they fell in love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you know where they worked?
I never asked that question. That's a good question.
Okay.
Maybe I'll have to find out. I don't know. I know it's in Sun Prairie. That's
Okay.
right outside of Madison there.
That's how.
Yep.
And I love that story. I love how you told it. And we're gonna actually keep the stories going. So the next question I have for you is actually to tell a story about a time where you faced adversity or spoke up and overcame a challenge. And so I just want to kind of have you dive in on that and something that was important for you.
So I think from my perspective, some of the most challenging things that each of us have to face is facing ourselves, and I guess facing our own demons, and looking ourselves in the mirror. And I think for me, that's probably some of the greatest challenges that I've faced is facing myself. So years ago, I mean, I grew up in church, and I was very some people say religious, but I was spiritual and religious, and I was very focused on that belief system. And so I was all about living righteously, and being sober, and all that. And then a lot of things happened, and in my 20s I changed, and I kind of fell off my path, and I partied a lot, and I enjoyed it. So I really had a good time in my 20s for about a decade. And that's where I met my good friends, Lana and Desiree. They're really some of my best friends that are just there for me over the years. And so they've seen me, at one stage of my life where I was just, the party animal, having a good time. And then, they see me change from that and refocus my life. And so it was about 7.5, almost 8 years ago, I decided to, change my life and refocus, change direction, change priorities. And it was very difficult. And I think as my latter 20s, I was really struggling and trying to become sober, and I had a hard time doing that. And as a Native American person, that is a constant reality and struggle for many Native folks. And I think it was in one of my college papers. I did a little research and investigation on that, and come to find out, Native Americans don't have a gene in them that signals them to stop drinking, and so you find that a lot of natives will drink in excess, and there's a lot of trauma that comes with that, and a lot of heartache, and it's just the negative side of our history that is still prevalent today. So I've struggled with that myself, and trying to overcome that. And so I took a lot of prayer and ceremonies and things that, and a real desire to change my life, and it took commitment and dedication. And so it's something that I still even struggle with today. It's because I did enjoy, partying and hanging out and having a good time. I had a blast, but it was like kind of like the focal point, or it was like center stage of my life at that time. And I knew that's not how I wanted to do. I knew I had other things that I wanted to do. And if I was going to continue down that path, I would not be able to accomplish anything that was in my heart and mind at the time. And I certainly wouldn't be sitting here today.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
getting through that. Thank you for sharing that. Like that's pretty vulnerable. So, and I think like oftentimes we don't like men in particular don't share stories like that. And so that's thank you for sharing. So my next I'm gonna go into this next question because we kind of discussed this a little over the phone too. Um, so I think we mentioned we talked a little bit about like our generation. So like I first generation Mexican American. So like yeah, I was the firstborn for my family into the United States. And I believe you said you were maybe like second generation or third. I can't remember exactly.
Essentially, first, my father was born and raised in Mexico,
Mhm.
and yeah, I guess from that side of the family, I would be first generation
Right.
born.
Yeah. And so with that, when you come from parents that are, from immigrant background and from different country, and then, you know, you're the first person of the family to be born here in the United States. um, you're kind of like forced to assimilate to what their hopes and dreams are, and this like quote unquote American dream. And so with that comes a lot of diluting of culture and traditions, and um, language gets lost. And so maybe I just want to ask you, because now I'm in my 30s, and it hasn't been until like my 30s and where I had children where I wanted to make sure that they were knowing about their own cultures and where they come from. Because that was really important for me as a mother to make sure that that stuff isn't getting like lost, and that we're retaining that somehow. Um and so I just wanted to ask you, like, how are you reclaiming culture um in your own personal life?
Yes, a great question. So there's, I think, my case is a little bit different than some, but not. I think there's probably some folks that are probably maybe similar. Even though I am considered a first generation here in the United States from my Mexican side. I still have my Native American side, which we are people have been here for generations. But there's most definitely been an assimilation and a colonization that has taken place on my Native American side. And from my Mexican side, I didn't grow up with my father, and so I don't have a lot of those influences from his upbringing and from what he considers his traditional um, ways. And so the I guess my Mexican side is kind of like I know of it. I know some Spanish. I can speak some Spanish, very little, and I am familiar. I go to Mexico and I visit my family down there, and I really enjoy that, and enjoy all the Mexican foods. But I guess I don't. That is the extent of my um, Mexican upbringing, and so there's a gap and I guess a loss there that occurred from that cultural aspect that I never grew up with. Also, at the same time, there's a definite gap on my Native American side also through assimilation and colonization, and that has occurred over the last few centuries with our people. And being Oneida, and from towards the East Coast and New York area, we were some of the first tribes to come in contact with Europeans. And so that assimilation process started possibly 100 years before folks, in the Midwest and the West Coast happened. So many of our folks from Oneida lost their traditional ways and they lost their culture. And we here in our community in Oneida, Wisconsin, we are just now I can't say just now, but we are beginning to reclaim our culture and beginning to reclaim our language. And it's sad to say that all the things that have occurred to our people where we only have just a couple of language speakers that are fluent in Oneida language here in our community. I know there's more in Canada. There's a group of Oneidas in Canada, and then there's also a group of Oneidas still in New York. And so, in totality, our people, we have a very limited number of people who speak our language, and then um, there's only here in our community we only have a handful of people that have dedicated their lives to learning the culture and traditional ways. And I feel like in the last few years there's definitely been a resurgence of that. And there's a desire, a really strong desire to reclaim our culture, and it's really beautiful to see. And it seems like every year it's just more and more people wanting to learn the language and go to ceremonies and go back to a traditional indigenous diet, which is incredibly important. And all those things are intertwined into who we are as a people. And so myself as an individual of Mexican and Oneida descent, I'm just learning. I feel like just a child learning my own culture on both sides. And so that's something that as an adult, I realize that I have to take the responsibility for myself and take that personal responsibility to reclaim my own culture on both sides. And I've always been, proud to be Oneida. I've always been proud to be Mexican, and so, but it's more than just being proud to be something. You have to know who you are, where you come from, and be able to pass that down to the next generation. And so, otherwise, that identity gets lost, the culture gets lost. And so we've already seen that. We've seen that
Right.
in the generation before me, and even my grandparents' generation. They were beaten, when they spoke the language. And so it's those types of things have had a long-term effect on our people.
I
So
agree. Yeah. I think that it's amazing to me how like colonization just completely erases language. It erases the foods we eat. Like it affects
Yes.
every aspect of our cultures. And I was just even saying, I was like engaging with someone today about how like Day of the Dead is coming up, or Dia de los Muertos, and so many people, like colonization is so strong that people don't even realize how co-opted it has become, because it was originally a corn harvest festival that was celebrated during the summer, and somehow it became, I know how it became like the celebration, on November 2nd, but like people just they don't understand.
Mhm.
And that's how bad our cultures have been affected by colonization, and it's like a span of hundreds of years. And
Yeah.
so like that's why it's like extremely important for me now, as a huge responsibility as a mother of like multiracial children, that they also know their motherlands and their language, and then their culture as well. And I'm still learning. I'm in my 30s, but I'm still also doing the work myself. So thank you for sharing that information. And then I'm going to jump into one more kind of heavy question. And that is, what does sovereignty mean to you?
Sovereignty mean to me. So in my own mind and from my own perspective, which is my own, and when you talk to other Native Americans, they're going to have a different perspective and different opinion, and that's okay. It's all good, and whatever someone believes it to be for them, then that's what it is for them. But for myself, um, um, being sovereign is not only having the right to govern yourself, but actually governing yourself, and whether that's as an individual or as a community, as a nation, and then also with governing yourself, being able to sustain yourself, self-sustainability. And I believe those two are intertwined and linked together. I don't feel that I or my people can be truly sovereign without being truly sustainable. And um, and that's kind of some of my goals to bring our people to a level of self-sustainability where we um, don't have to depend on any other entity for our resources. And that's how our people used to be. Hundreds of years ago, our communities and our nation, our tribes were self-sustaining. We controlled areas of land, and we farmed and harvested, and we uh, harvested wild game, and we were free, and we were sovereign. We governed ourselves. We took care of and provided for ourselves and our people. And and so there's many different, I guess, aspects or beliefs of sovereignty. And I have and then someone much older than myself tell me that uh, you cannot define sovereignty, and once you do that, you limit sovereignty. You limit what it is and what it can become. And so that's always thought provoking for myself. And if I say this is what I believe in, what is sovereignty, um, then that's all it can ever be. But if I don't define it, and I let it grow, and let it expand, and then it could be ever evolving. And I think it has to be, especially because we as people, and over time things change, everything changes over time. And so um, uh, we have to continue to evolve as individuals, as people, as a society. And so our beliefs then have to also change um, with it, or sometimes force to change. Some people are unwilling to change, which is fine too.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, so yeah, that's a multi-layered layered question with, you know, multi-tiered leveled answers to that. And it depends on, you know, what are you talking about specifically, individual personal sovereignty, or you're talking about sovereignty of a tribal nation, or you're talking about the relationship between tribes in the United States or other tribes, the relationship between tribes or other international governments. So yeah, it's there's a lot of different levels to that. So
I love that. I think that that was such a profound answer. And it really like strengthened my understanding of sovereignty. So I really appreciate that. And I think that the question that I have to follow up is probably the question I'm most excited to know about, because listening to all the work that you do and how intentional you are in attaching your understandings and your values to your work, um, is really like a full person, like full individual job. And it takes a team, but like the work of the individuals is great work, and it's large work, and it's soul work, and it's heart work. And so I want to go back to what you said earlier about how rest is imperative for the work that you do. And I also want to know, what are some of the other ways that you practice self care and other ways that you recalibrate from the work that is sometimes taxing and difficult to push through?
yeah, yeah. Self-care is, as I'm learning, is so incredibly important. It's something I guess I've always been taught, and I've always known, but didn't always practice. And in my first term as councilman, I almost burnt myself out more than once. And as I had to, I guess I'm continuing to learn the hard way that I need to stop and rest. And it's important because if I'm not at my best, I can't be doing my best. I can't give my best to my job and my responsibilities. And so, what am I doing to self care? That's a good question, and I kind of go in phases of focusing on my self care, and then kind of maybe overdoing it, and focusing on all the things that need to get done within my, you know, my role and my responsibilities. But I think this year has been, I've definitely realized that I need to have balance. And I had a lot of help and assistance from my aunts and my relatives that helped me to do that, to keep me together, I should say. And so during this year, earlier this year, and up until recently, um, I had to do my job, and then I also had to campaign for reelection, which is strenuous in and of itself. Those are, you know, two things simultaneously that were going on. And so one of my aunts is a Reiki practitioner, and did a lot of energy work on me weekly. It was we had a weekly schedule of energy work, and that was so helpful to just keep me going every single week. And I didn't realize how bad I needed it until after those sessions are done, and like how exhausted I was every single week, and how much I needed those sessions. Also, one of my other aunts is massage therapist, and so I would um, get massages from her almost not quite every week, but every few weeks, and so I try to do those two things in combination, and that helps a lot. Um, and those are kind of my two main things I do, but I also like to have fun too. And my cousins and relatives, they like to golf. And so I've been getting into golf the last couple of years. And so that's a fun time off to, you know, be able to do that. And also now it's hunting season. And so love hunting and being in the woods and being in nature. And so really always excited for this time of year. I can get out there and enjoy nature. So, yeah.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Daniel, for everything that you've said in this space today. And we have a couple viewers who have a few questions for you.
Oh,
So,
wow.
Yeah, we've never had, oh, I think we have in the past had a few questions from people watching. But I thought it was a good question that maybe you can help answer, but I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it.
mhm.
For on behalf of Karen Wenzel, they said, being a Milwaukee Oneida my whole life, why is there such a disconnect between the city Oneidas and reservation Oneidas?
That's that's an ever constant question from Milwaukee Oneidas. Ever constant. There's a lot. I think there's a lot of reasons for that,
Mhm.
and the only number one reason is a lack of understanding. And there's a lack of understanding from both sides. And I've lived both sides. I'm from Milwaukee. I grew up in Oneida on the res, and after I graduated high school, I moved right back to Milwaukee. And so I'm a Milwaukee Oneida and I'm a res Oneida. And so I understand both perspectives, and it comes down to a lack of understanding of who we are as a people and who they are. Like up there on the res, they do this and they do that, and they have this and they have that. And then for the folks on the reservation that don't leave the res and they never lived outside of the reservation, they have a lack of understanding of how people are and how they function outside of the reservation. And so there's a lack of experience and understanding. And so they view, Milwaukee Oneidas as the city Indians that don't know anything about this community here in Oneida. And so it's really, people just have to open up their hearts and minds to each other and realize we're all the same people with different perspectives and different lifestyles and different backgrounds, even though we're the same people. And so it's a interesting thing. And you have to be Oneida to understand Oneidas and how we function. And there's always prejudices and thoughts and beliefs about something or someone you don't know, and
Yeah.
that's the way it is. And so
It's like
it's
that in Mexican culture too. Like, oh, I'm from
yeah,
Mexico. I was born in Mexico, and
right, yeah.
You're Mexican American. You don't know what it's
Mhm.
like for us real Mexicans over here. So
Right,
yeah, I totally get it. But
same
like
thing.
story stories connect people and
Yeah.
bring understanding. So that leads me to the next question. And I don't even know if we have time for this. Probably not. I'm gonna let you say yes or no to this, but
Oh, it's good.
there was one person who asked, um, I hope to hear a story about your tribe. So,
A story
not to
about my
put you on the
tribe.
spot,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know what that means
I, I,
exactly,
I,
but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, a story about my tribe is there's hundreds and thousands of stories, and it can. Um, there's so many stories, and I guess you have to get specific into what it is you want to know.
Mhm.
But I could do a quick synopsis if they just don't know anything about Oneida. Um, the we're in our language we are Onioti Aga, a people of the Standing Stone, and then we're a part of a original five nation, now six, and there's other nations involved in a confederacy, and it's called the Haudenosaunee, or we call ourselves Lodenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse, where we live in long houses, and our homelands are upstate New York, and along there's they call them the five finger lakes up there, and um, it's a beautiful area, and I've been there a number of times. And so with the colonists coming through, and the United States forming, there was a lot of turmoil at that time during the revolutionary times of when the United States was formed. And the Oneidas specifically were split apart, and we are considered America's first allies. And we saved George Washington and his army at Valley Forge. This is something they don't tell you in the history books in your public schools, but
Of course not.
yeah, everyone knows about Valley Forge, and Washington almost died, but they don't tell you that it was the Oneidas that came and saved Washington and fed his men and clothed his men, and we got them through the winter, and we helped them win the war. And so that's kind of a thing of note. And so it's a very historical and pivotal point in this country. Um, and we played a part in that. And there were repercussions of that we're still dealing with today. So, and from those actions, our tribe is split in three ways. Some folks still in New York, and some in Canada, and some here in Wisconsin. And so the United States does in their document, there's letters and documents from the United States government recognizing us for our actions. But then also we're also considered, from some of our own people, as traitors or sellouts too at the same time. And so I kind of jokingly, for facetiously, say it's all our fault. But it's just, I know it's sad, but it's partly true. And so we are, we as Oneidas have to come to terms with that, as specifically as Wisconsin Oneidas. So there's a lot of history, a lot of things that we could talk about, and there's many books. If you're really interested, there's a number of books out there that you can research and read, and so yeah, just if you're really interested, start diving deep. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was so wonderful, so informative, so transformative, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate the gems that you have dropped for the past hour, because you just been dropping gems. I love it so much. And that's all the questions I have for you. I just want to continue to sing your praises and say that you're wonderful. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it to Nicole to close us out. So
Oh, you want me to close it out?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, tell us something we don't know about you.
Something I don't like to talk about myself. That's what I'm just kidding. And truthfully, I don't. And it's quite interesting. Even though I'm an elected public official and a representative of my people, I really I like solitude, and I like being alone and quiet and peaceful. And so it's kind of like I have to have my alone time in order to be able to function in a public capacity.
Right.
And a lot of people might think I'm some, outgoing person, and I'm really not. So, yeah.
Unless you're coming to see me DJ somewhere, then
Yes. Yes. Let me know when and where. I
not
love good music.
anytime soon. That's not happening. But okay, thank you so much, Daniel. We're gonna go ahead and stop this live stream. For anyone watching, we had a good audience today. And I believe what you shared is extremely important. And I hope people learn something out of this with you. So thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, say bye to everybody. But we're going to stay on. We're just stopping the live stream, so we'll stay on this. Okay.
Adios and Nagiwa in Oneida.
Oh, wait, Nagiwa?
Nagiwa.
Oh.
Is
Awesome.
saying goodbye.
All right. Bye.